Hey family, welcome to D&D and Family Deep Dives.
The show where we do a deep dive into a different Dungeons & Dragons book every month, giving you all the ins and the outs and the whats and the nots and how we would play the game. First episode's going to be pretty much an overall review that is pretty spoiler-free. We're not going to go into the adventure at all in this video. In episode 2, we're going to go through the setting. And that also is going to be pretty spoiler-free, except for, we're going to talk about Strixhaven as a college and all the different things that are inside of it.
For part 3, we're going to be going through the story itself. This is where we're going to get a little bit more into the spoiler territory. So if you're a player or you want to discover it for yourself by reading the book firsthand, you're going to want to shy away from part 3 and part 4 until you've read the book yourself. Part 4 is going to be how we would run a game of Strixhaven's A Curriculum of Chaos at our own table.
So Strixhaven is a tie-in with Magic the Gathering, and so we wanted to give a little bit of our background about how we approach this book in particular, so that you know where we're coming from. Neither Amanda and I are Magic the Gathering players.
No, I have no background in playing the game. I do know it's a card game, but beyond that, I don't know too much.
So we looked at Magic the Gathering a little bit, and we kind of, just so we could understand a little bit, I have no idea how to play this game. It looks like they were made congruently together, so Strixhaven seems to be as new of a thing to Magic the Gathering as it does to Dungeons & Dragons. All the artwork and stuff is the same from the cards, and it's great.
What drew me to the book initially was just the love of a magical school in a D&D setting. My first thought, naturally, as most things go to, Critical Role, was the Solstice Academy. And I have an idea of what the inside workings of that kind of a school of that magnitude would look like, how things would work, how things would run. So this was a nice sneak peek at someone's version of a magical school.
And my first thoughts were probably more along the line of a lot of people when they hear magic school and they think of Harry Potter, which is something I grew up reading. I actually, when our oldest was younger, we went through the entire series as a bedtime story out loud. Mm-hmm. And so, in particular for us, the idea of having a campaign take place inside of a magic school sounded really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as folks who, hopefully, like many of you, play with their kids. It's a nice setting that we thought might provide for some optional opportunities other than just, your typical hack and slash murder hobo event. Although our kids do enjoy those moments too. It's nice to give them alternatives.
So we also wanted to talk about how we approach reading one of these books.
Yeah, we don't particularly run modules as they are, cover to cover. We typically homebrew a little bit more at our table.
All right, so let's just jump into it.
So Strixhaven is a magical college. And like Ben mentioned, we first tend to think of a Harry Potter-esque world, which is a little more grade school, and this takes it up to the collegiate level.
Unlike Hogwarts, it doesn't feel like a living and breathing entity so much. It really feels like a college that the students go to, but it doesn't have like a mind of its own. It's a little less magic than
it's more about the practical everyday learning of magic and how to use it, and less so that the school itself is a magical entity. Unlike, in Harry Potter, where the banisters and
the staircases
that's
move.
The one, the staircases.
Yeah, the staircases move, or like the hallway decides to reconfigure itself because it wants to play a practical joke on the students or something.
What have you.
Yeah.
Strixhaven University. What does it have? It has 5 different colleges and 6 locations. We're going to go through each of them in a deep dive later on. But we're going to start out by just listing them out and what their various general features are.
The first one we have is Lorehold College. Lorehold is basically your history majors. And then we have Prismari, which are your art majors.
We've got Quandrix, which is kind of like an engineering major theme. Silverquill, which is your English majors. And Witherbloom, which is like your sciences.
Each of these colleges kind of have their own separate campus that is all linked together into a central campus hub. So the first years, they don't go to one of the specific colleges. They kind of stay in this central hub. And then once you get to second year and above, that's when you kind of branch off to your own flavor. Now, each campus also deals with a duality, these conflicting ideas that make up the college theme as a whole.
Yeah. For example, Witherbloom has the dichotomy of life and death, and they have their own deans respectively, but everyone there will learn about the various uses of life and death and how that applies in a magical way.
So one of the great things that this book really tried to do is it tried to not limit this campaign setting to spellcasters. And instead, you can be a barbarian, you can be a rogue, you can be a fighter, and still attend Strixhaven because you're more about trying to learn about magic as a whole instead of the performance of it.
With the Strixhaven Initiate feat, you can gain access to 2 cantrips and a first level spell that corresponds with the college of your choice. And that spell slot is not used. It's a freebie spell, and it's once per long rest.
Each college also has its own mascot, as opposed to the university having a mascot as a whole. Unfortunately, life's not great for the mascots themselves, which we'll get into. You know, you would think of them almost kind of like familiars to the students that don't latch on to a particular student generally, but just kind of like help the college they live in overall.
Yeah, they're pretty much apt to want to help anybody associated with the college they belong to.
Right. And they're also willing participants. I say willing participants in experiments and studying of spells for the Strixhaven students.
Also participants in some sport games where they're more akin to a football. But we will discuss that later.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the new things that Strixhaven, the book, has to bring to Dungeons & Dragons. And the first one is the Owlin race.
I was super excited about this. I just absolutely love the idea of playing any bird-esque creature and seeing them come up with the variety and flavor that they can within that is really great. I do think that it's interesting because you could play an owl in a variety of ways as far as the aesthetic goes. You could be a little bit more menacing and have your little, horned up feathers, or you could be a sweet little demure, fluffy white owl.
Yeah, there's so much variety in the species of owl that it really can lend you. And even in the book, it talks about how owlin race can be like smaller creatures or medium creatures too.
So the owlins are distant relatives to the giant owls in the Feywild. And although we didn't get a ton of lore on that aspect, it is really cool to think about the possibilities there. It kind of makes me think of how kobolds are distant kin to dragons and how that impacts their lineage.
And one of the cool things about them is that they get the ability to fly right out of the gate.
There's a little bit of a trade-off there in that, say, you don't get the talent attack you would with the Acrocra, but you do, however, get dark vision up to 120 feet, and you also get the trait Silent Feathers, which would make for a fantastic rogue.
The other big thing that this book, probably the biggest in my opinion, that this book brings to Dungeons & Dragons as a whole is a relationship mechanic, a way for your players to track their relationships with NPCs, all the way up from like enemies or rivals, all the way up to like what they call beloved.
Kind of akin to like a Stardew Valley mechanic where you can have interactions throughout the series of the gameplay and develop these relationships for the better or worse. And then having those relationships bloom in their various ways brings different outcomes. Right.
You get these relationship encounters in which you will gain either like a positive or a negative score, just like Stardew Valley, except for it's a lot more simplified. Stardew Valley has like several different rungs. This is pretty much rival, don't know you, associate, Beloved.
Yeah.
So it's super simplified.
Which is great, especially when working with kids. It's very, very to the point.
Exactly. They also comes with relationship boons and relationship banes, depending on your score with this. So you have an incentive to like work on a relationship with an NPC.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the boons might be something like your time travel is reduced, your distance, you have an increased efficiency in your speed. And another one could be maybe you don't make a friend. Maybe you make an enemy and they spread rumors about you in the gossip column.
One of my favorite banes in the book is that there's a NPC that's like in the band, and if you get a bane from them, anytime you walk into a room where there's a band playing, they all just stop, mean mug you, which is just hysterical. It'd be really fun.
Something that's also great about the relationship mechanic is that it's not necessarily, when you're reaching the level of beloved, a romantic relationship. It's just someone that's really part of your tribe. It's really like your ride or die. They've got your back. So that's fantastic for somebody who may want to take advantage of building relationships but doesn't necessarily feel like they need to build a relationship in game. Some people are for it, some people aren't. And it's also great when you're running stuff with little kids who that's maybe not even on their radar yet.
Overall, we do feel like this is something that is wonderful to bring into a game with kids.
It's great because, often in games with adults, you go to the merchant and you buy some things. Maybe you haggle, make a good deal. You build that budding relationship, and maybe he gives you a deal the next time you come in because you're a familiar face. Well, as an adult, you've kind of already got that figured out. You already are aware that your interactions with people will impact how they interact back with you. But when you're dealing with kids and you're teaching them social skills, sometimes it helps to see a concrete measure of how their actions have impacted others and how that impact will come back to them, positive or negatively.
And one of my favorite parts is it is tracked by the player and not the DM. And anytime you take a little bit of work off the DM and give it to the player, I am all there for it. Like most of these books, adventure series and such, there are a bunch of new monsters. This book comes with about 40 new monsters slash NPCs. But one thing about this book is a lot of times with these books, you can throw the monsters pretty much into any campaign. A lot of these are very, very Strixhaven specific.
I think there's a couple in there that you could wiggle into your everyday random game, but for the most part, it's pretty specialized.
Strixhaven is a school that is founded by dragons, and the founder dragons all have their own stat blocks and in the books that, because they're around, they're still there, and your characters can actually interact with them, and they can be part of the story, which is really cool.
And they're gorgeous.
Yeah,
I love their design.
Yeah, they are really cool dragons.
So one of the monsters that I feel would be a great use in a variety of games is the mage hunters. They're terrifying. Yeah. They're insect-like monsters that really reminded me of the Colorak from The Witcher.
For me, it was the Garthim from the Dark Crystal, those like crab creatures that the Skeksis control.
So,
truth time.
Truth time. One point that we felt a little bit short was the magic in Strixhaven, magic items in Strixhaven and of the like. I felt like we could have gotten a little deeper with that.
Especially a school about magic, you'd think you'd get some cool new spells and some cool new magic items. But unfortunately, this book has very few of those. Yeah, luckily we got Tasha's Cauldron right after this one, so we did get treated to some more of that.
Absolutely.
But
So good.
when you look at this book, there's only 8 new magical items, and 5 of those are tomes that go to the specific colleges that you go to. And then one of them is like a
bottle of endless coffee.
Yeah, a bottle of endless coffee.
I'm a coffee girl, and I love that item. I just wish we saw a little bit more. Our other two items
that item's not any different from the endless flask besides the kind of liquid that it is in there.
And our other 2 items were items that can be found already in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
But that's not to say that there isn't some cool spells.
One of the favorite spells on the list for us was actually the level 1 silvery barbs.
That spell is really cool because it gives a character that you want, a foe, disadvantage, and takes that disadvantage and then gives a player of your choice advantage, who can then use that advantage as a reaction. So as something that, to a roll that they've already made, seeing that they're not doing it, and then they can be like, I want to roll my advantage there. Which is way overpowered.
One of the items that I think that our kid players might find a lot more enjoyable, but maybe not so much our the adults more than our adult players, is the magical item of the mascot plushie. The plushie item can be taken and applied to your arm or your leg, and it just sticks there. Magic. And it helps the player not be afraid, which is great for younger players who will akin that to snuggling their teddy bear at night when they're scared of the dark.
It's college.
College.
So, Strixhaven, as a book, is something that we would say probably has low playability as written.
As an entire campaign.
As an entire campaign.
From year 1 up through year 4 of your collegiate career.
Unlike most modules that I've read through, this one has a lot of work for the dungeon master to do to make it a really fun, enjoyable game. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's something that I think Strixhaven does very purposefully. Because while, as is not a very playable game, I do think that this game rates really high on inspiration.
Absolutely.
If you're reading this to get inspiration for how to run your own game, boy, is Strixhaven just great.
Strixhaven is much less concerned about telling you exactly how to play your adventure and more concerned with the DM and player agency and choice. As a homebrewing DM, I kind of appreciate it.
The entire time I was reading Strixhaven, there was like light bulb after light bulb after light bulb going off, and just like, ooh, this would be really cool if you did it like this. And while I may not play a Strixhaven game, I certainly think that I'm going to give playing a Magic School game a try. Overall, I think that this book offers a really cool setting and a cool concept for a Dungeons & Dragons campaign.
Absolutely. It's a different and unique experience than our previous books that we've gone through, where it provides a little bit less of a combat-heavy approach and a lot of magical fun.
As a parent, I think that this would be an excellent campaign to run for children.
Absolutely. Like we mentioned, probably not something we'd run all the way through for adults, but I could definitely see us playing with the kids through all 4 years.
Oh yeah, I mean it's something that that children are already familiar with. Like a school setting is something that they will be able to jump right into, kind of understand how it works right away.
Feel confident in the world.
Exactly, and be able to make choices that they would be able to think outside the box and stuff, because it's something they deal with everyday life. And that has it for our first video, guys, but stick around because we have 3 more videos coming out on Strixhaven, and we have so much more to talk about.
Like, subscribe, and stick around for part 2. We're going to take a deeper dive by going into a deep look on Strixhaven's locations and the setting.
Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed.
See you, fam.
Bye. Bye-bye! Bye-bye!